Hey dancers, it's Kirsten. Welcome to the Confident Dancer YouTube channel. Today I'm excited to share a conversation with you with Rachel Fine, who is from To The Point Nutrition. You probably, I hope you follow her on Instagram or you've seen her YouTube channel, her podcast. Rachel is a registered dietitian nutritionist who specializes in working with dancers. So we are in very good hands today to talk about how, as dancers, we can maintain a healthy relationship with food, healthy food habits, and all-around confidence in our bodies and our relationship with food, even when we are surrounded by pressure to do otherwise, pressure to have a very unhealthy relationship with food and our bodies. Even if you're in an environment where you feel like your peers are being praised for very unhealthy behaviors with food, this conversation is really for you because it's designed to really hit on some topics of what we can do to stay sane, stay healthy amidst the pressures that the ballet world unfortunately presents. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation. I really encourage you to reach out to Rachel if you're struggling with your relationship with food, struggling with knowing how to fuel yourself properly in a way that is both healthy and sustainable for you, but also helps you with your goals as a dancer. I really encourage you to reach out to Rachel. Again, her website, all of her information is linked down below. You can follow her on all social media platforms, To The Point Nutrition. She also has a YouTube channel, and we actually, at the same time this video is coming out, I also did a conversation with her for her YouTube channel around how we as dancers can overcome comparing ourselves to dancers, other dancers, and feeling negative about ourselves, having low self-confidence. We talk about, and I share some specific tips on how to build confidence and focus on what you're doing instead of constantly comparing yourself to others on her channel. So go check out Rachel's YouTube channel, which is called Nutrition for Dancers with Rachel Fine. All of that, again, is linked below, and I hope, without further ado, that you really enjoy this conversation with Rachel. So let's welcome her, shall we? Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to finally be here. I know we've been planning this for quite some time, so I am really looking forward to chatting with you.
Yes. Oh, me too. I realize I'm going to switch the view to gallery. Here we go. This is going to make more sense for the video. But
Perfect.
first, I already gave a little intro to the dancers watching, but I'd love to hear in your own words who you are and what do you do for work?
Awesome. Well, hi, everybody that's listening. My name is Rachel Fine. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm a former professional dancer turned dietitian who now works and specializes in the field of dancer health, nutrition, and wellness. I started my company To The Point Nutrition back in 2013 with honestly the same goals that I've kept for this what's going to be soon a decade, which is insane to think about.
Wow.
But it's really to help dancers not just learn how to fuel for performance, but to find a way to do this in a way that's sustainable and
Yeah.
enjoyable. So my history as a dancer, I mean, I've been dancing my whole life. It was pretty much always the main thing that I did. There wasn't much quote unquote balance that I really should have probably had growing up. So dance was definitely at the forefront of my mind. And of course, growing up, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the internet was emerging, but you didn't have social media. There was nothing of what we have now in regards to even knowing that balance is important for a dancer, right? It's like you go to your studio, you're focusing, and I was a true bunhead. What happened with me though is that I started to get really interested in health and nutrition. I was at several summer intensives, and at most intensives, which they still have now, you'll have like a nutrition seminar.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting in this seminar. I was young, maybe like 16 at the time. And, it was pretty harmless. We were learning about quote unquote healthy foods and the macronutrients and so forth. And one thing that just really struck a chord with me was the person who was teaching it said one statement that really stuck with me. And it was, our bodies, our tool as an instrument, what we put into it is going to really impact what comes out of it on the stage. Now, this statement is true, right? It also seems pretty harmless. There's just one caveat. I'm a recovering perfectionist. At the time, I wasn't a recovering perfectionist. I was a full-blown type A perfectionist. So when someone tells me you are what you put into your body, I take that to the 200th degree, and it
Yeah.
easily gets translated into I can no longer eat these foods that are quote unquote less healthy or less
Mhm.
nourishing. I put those in quotes and we can get to that soon. I can no longer eat these foods. I have to eat this specific quote unquote healthy list of foods that are acceptable for a healthy dancer. And that's it. And
Yeah, that's it.
there was zero room in my head for error at that time. And it took only probably 7 months for me to fully burn myself out of not just this way of eating, which we can now arguably call clean eating. And I say those words purposely because we can get to them. But it took, I would say, less than a year at least I'm sorry, at most, to completely burn myself out of that lifestyle, to um, destroy is a strong word. I'm not going to say that, but to diminish the passion and the love that I had for ballet at the time, where it quickly went from being this, what had always been a love, a passion, something that gave me joy and an exit, to being something that was a job, but not in the literal sense, like in the so much had to go into what I was doing for this career that I was building as a dancer, specifically in relation to the foods I was eating, that it was just all too exhausting
Yeah.
for me. And then, of course, what also I didn't know at the time, because I thought I was doing everything right, I was severely undernourishing my body, because
Yeah.
so much of what we see with obsessively quote unquote healthy eating, which now we can say it's not a formal diagnosis, but we can arguably call it something called orthorexia. We can get to that. What we often see simultaneous to this is just the underfueling, not eating enough in general. So all of this was happening at the same time for me, and it caused just a major degree of burnout. So much that I had to take a major step back out of dance. This was also aligning at the time of college. So I said, you know what, I still wanted to dance. I wasn't completely burnt out where I needed to fully take myself out of the studio, but I could not do it to the degree that I was doing it. I was, granted, exhausted. I wasn't eating
Yeah.
enough. So like, no wonder I was so tired. I didn't see it at the time. But long story short, I ended up changing my degree from being a degree in the fine arts to a degree actually in clinical nutrition. So I was still interested in health and nutrition and all of that. I wanted to learn more about it. And that's what ended up happening. I ended up
Yeah.
switching gears, completing my degrees in nutrition as a clinical dietitian. Fast forward a good 7 years of academic schooling and coursework and licensure work. And I even worked in a hospital for a couple of years. I finally, was able to kind of close all the doors in my life of the clinical nutrition part and really just focus on what I've always wanted to focus on, which was working with the population that I felt needed most. And then I felt I
Yeah.
could talk to and relate to most, and that was dancers. So yeah, and it's kind of been a love story ever since. I say this lightly because nobody ever really has it figured out. But after all of my training and after all my education, I was finally able to understand what it really means to build sustainable habits around food in a way that allows dancers to reach their performance goals, but do so in a way without having to sacrifice what I sacrificed stupidly, which was my
Totally.
relationship with food.
Yeah, absolutely. This story is really inspiring because I do find that in the ballet community specifically, I think many dancers know that we need help around certain issues like the mental challenges we face or the challenges we face around body image and food. And there are definitely some sources of support out there in the world, but people who don't specialize in working with dancers, I find that they can absolutely help. So I'm really not interested at all in diminishing the value of those services. But there is this extraordinary connection that can be formed with dancers and the person they're seeking help from when they know that that person understands their context and is giving guidance that is specifically designed to serve them within that very specific context. So as a support person to dancers myself, I have seen that so many dancers are like, yeah, I worked with this therapist, which I'm different than a therapist. I'm not trying to equate myself with that, but they've sought out that support and they're just like, but I was so hesitant to really take in what they had to say because I'm like, oh, you don't understand ballet. So to know that you really brought this journey of yours full circle and are now being the person that I'm sure you wish you had when you're totally burnt out, it's so inspiring and it's so needed. And I definitely wanted to comment on this, what I call this mathematical mindset that I notice within the ballet community. And it can be directed towards your relationship with food, or how much time you put into cross training, or how many turns you do one day. And then there's that idea that seems like a nice idea of the only person you should be competing with is yourself. And that means you should be better than you were yesterday. There are these quotes about that, I think one by Baryshnikov, which is a nice idea, but if it's taken as an absolute truth, mixed with this very mathematical mindset that I notice is rampant within the ballet community, it really can cause damage, like your story suggests. Because sure, maybe it's helpful to go towards one food and maybe instead of another food if your goal is specific. So sure, maybe that can be more helpful towards your goal. But if you have a very absolute mindset around this is good, this is bad, more of the good stuff will get me here, then it can just start to create such a toxic relationship as you were exemplifying. So yeah, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, several things actually. So many people get so confused about. So, one thing about me and my training as a dietitian, I'm not only a clinical dietitian, and I'm a trained sports dietitian as well, but I'm also trained as a certified counselor of intuitive eating. Now, intuitive eating is this approach, this non diet approach that was, as we call it, in regard to really supporting our overall relationships with all foods. But the thing is, intuitive eating has become very popular in the past, I would say 5 years. It's really been popular for almost 20 years, but it's exploded in the past 5 years. And a major misconception with intuitive eating, especially because of social media, and I'm sure you can relate, because of what we can actually get across in one little tiny square of a post or 3-second video, the huge misconception is eat whatever you want when you want, doesn't matter, don't even think about your food choices. That's a huge misconception. As dancers, we're athletes. It's not about being unintentional or mindless around food. It's also not discrediting the idea that there are certain foods that are more nourishing than other foods. I'm not going to sit here and say that a chocolate chip cookie is more nourishing than a bowl of sauteed broccoli, right? There's way more vitamins in the sauteed broccoli, but that doesn't mean that we are bad people for eating a chocolate chip cookie. So, to what you were saying, I think a huge misconception about intuitive eating is that we're, when I say we're, intuitive eating dietitians are only promoting like that we all eat donuts and cookies all day long. That's not the case. It's actually, we're learning how to eat any food we want in a way that's going to support us. So correct, a cupcake, it's not going to support you 10 minutes before a dance class. It's not going to give you the energy you need for a 4-hour rehearsal. That doesn't mean that when we do find a nice time to eat that cupcake, that you are either need to regret it, need to feel guilty about it, and or are a bad person for doing it. So and so much of that, like you said, comes down to removing the all or nothing mindset, the black and white thinking. And I love what you said, that mathematical mindset. One thing you said that I actually just loved was the quote about, your biggest competition is yourself. What immediately comes to mind for me with that, and we can get into this in a bit, is when it comes to food, nutrition, and body image, I have a lot of problems with that quote because so often we'll see dancers in their later teen years after puberty that are saying, they'll come to me and they'll say, Rachel, but 2 years ago, I looked like this. And they'll be like, well, 2 years ago, you hadn't gone through puberty yet. Do you really
Yes,
want your
that's so
25-year-old body to look
true.
like your 15-year-old body? So this whole
And
idea
dancers are
of,
like, yes, exactly, I do.
yeah,
What's the
of course.
problem
And
with that,
then
Rachel?
that's a whole new episode that now we have to talk
Yes.
about. But the bottom line is like bodies are meant to change. And of course,
Yeah.
we can get into this. I don't want to veer too off. I don't want to veer too far too soon,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of mindset obstacles that need to be talked about as among
Yeah.
dancers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'd just love to hear, before I ask you about what do you see as some of the main pressures dancers face? And I want to add context to why I find that so important to talk about it. It's because there's so much insight that is very valuable online that you could gain for free on what to do, how to develop a healthy relationship with food, what are some helpful foods to eat, or how to build a intuitive relationship with food. However, what is often lacking from these free forms of support is the guidance on how to acknowledge and resolve the obstacles that stand in your way of doing what you know could be good for you. And so we will talk about what do you see are some of those pressures that dancers face, and how can we start to work around those things. But first, I'd love to just hear about what are some of the main pillars of your own ideology around food. I know you already mentioned a couple with your training around intuitive eating, but what are some messages that you really stand for ballet dancers?
A really great question. So before we can truly heal our relationships with food, we need, in my opinion, to be aware and hyper diligent around diet culture. So specifically dancer diet culture. So the first pillar of my whole framework, which is called the Healthy Dancer Framework, it's something I've created about back in 2019.
Mhm.
And the first is, how do we ditch dancer diet culture? How do we learn how to identify messages that are not supporting us simply because they're promoting restrictive lifestyles around food? And when we look at the facts, we know, and when I say when we look at the facts, when we look at the evidence, we know that trying to manipulate our body size by turning to restrictive dieting or over exercising doesn't work long term. We know that 98% of diets fail. Okay. When I say fail, and then when you hear in the media, like, oh, what works, we need to first define what we're talking about here, right? And most often when we hear about diet culture or fad diets, the first thing that is being either marketed or promised is this idea of weight loss. And what happens is dancers especially get very hung up on this idea that they need to, quote unquote, lose weight. Now, this is not just in dancer culture, this is in the culture at large, but then of course you're taking dancer or dance culture, I should say, and this is becoming exacerbated simply because of the aesthetic roots, unfortunately, of our industry that of course need and are hopefully changing at a glacial pace, but we're working towards it. So ditching diet culture is one of the first things, and that really involves being very aware of what diet culture is, what's being taught, what's being educated about. And just like you said, it's not that there is a shortage of information out there, right? Because of social media, because of Google, there's a surplus of information. And the thing with nutrition, the thing that's different about nutrition when compared to many other fields is that we all eat. We all need to rely on food at multiple times throughout our day. So you have everybody in the world relying on this like same tool to fuel their bodies. Some people start to really fall in love with that, which is great, right? We should all develop these great relationships and experiences with food, but because of that, everyone becomes their own expert in what potentially works for their body. So now you have these people who are calling themselves experts, who are coming and now educating vulnerable populations like dancers. it's not that this is necessarily a bad thing. Some people are going to still be helpful and provide helpful information. It's just that there's no oversight. There's no governing body that's providing oversight among this education. So when it comes to nutrition specifically for dancers, we do encourage that it come from dietitians, where there is a governing body of regulating that type of education. But yeah, so for the most part, the first thing is, how do we start to become aware? How do we identify messages that are not serving us in a helpful way, messages that are perhaps over prioritizing weight loss, prioritizing habits around food that are restrictive. And we can say restrictive from a biological standpoint in regard to truly restricting calories, and from a psychological standpoint where there are food rules, where you're saying, well, I can't eat XYZ because it's quote unquote unhealthy, for example. So that's one major important thing that I focus on in regard to the dancers I work with. And then the next step in regard to making peace with food. How can we now heal our relationship with foods that we all enjoy? And so much of this involves really a step-by-step approach, working with someone for support. How can we reintroduce foods into our daily life that we perhaps feel we can't trust ourselves around? So again, it kind of comes back to that all or nothing mindset, where a lot of dancers will say, I get what you're talking about, Rachel. I want to eat cookies without guilt, but when I start eating them, I eat the whole box. Like, there's nothing you can tell me. I eat the whole box. So what we're now working on are strategies. How can we remove this mindset of, I need to get it all in now because starting tomorrow, I'm not going to do it again. Now we start to think about, well, how can we remove the perhaps anticipated restriction? So I really comes down to this umbrella term of restriction, and a lot of dancers thinking, oh, well, I don't restrict myself, I don't restrict my calories. But you really have to unravel that, because then all of a sudden you start hearing about patterns. You start hearing about how, well, on Saturday nights, these are the only nights I end up eating dessert. It's very easy for dancers to fall into that Monday morning mindset of, I need to start fresh, I need to restart. So right there, even though it's not perhaps a direct restriction, it's an anticipated restriction that we need to try and diminish.
Yes, that was me in college, by the way.
Yes.
And you've
so many
I'm
dancers.
sure you've heard this all the time, and I hear this from all sorts of people, dancers or not. Oh, I'll be good tomorrow. Ew, the morality around food. And it's just amazing as well how much of so many of the topics we discuss in the dance community, whether it be, mindset or nutrition, how much of this conversation comes down to our psychology. Because if you have this relationship with certain foods that negative, or, I like to call them unpleasant emotions, are tied to, because even the connotation that a certain emotion is bad, that can cause some sort of lack of emotional health and mental health within a person. So, or for me, when I'm helping someone to resolve their performance anxiety, which is something I used to be so afflicted by, one of the main fears that people tend to cite around performing is the fear of making a mistake. So removing the label of bad from a mistake and all the different connotations that come from that, and the narratives attached to it about what kind of person you are, what your future will be, when we break down those layers of meaning and start to unravel the label of bad around something, I think the misconception is that you will make more mistakes or you will eat more cookies. But what's so interesting from the psychological perspective is we're removing the resistance from eating the cookie or making the mistake. It doesn't actually make you more susceptible to eating more cookies or making more mistakes. It just lessens a lot of your suffering around performing and eating. But then also it allows you to have enough peace within yourself to make aligned decisions, or to be responsive consciously rather than so reactive to your food choices, or to reactive to your mistakes, whatever it is. So I just love that pattern and that overlap in all sorts of different fields of, it's really a mindset that can be constructed that can lead to flourishing in a lot of different areas of our life. as dancers?
Absolutely. And one thing that I like to remind dancers, especially, and it goes into what you're saying, is when we start to have a bit more of a compassionate approach towards those behaviors in general. So let's just say, as an example, I know we work to try and prevent the instance happening of you perhaps eating the entire box of cookies, but also we work on the idea of, well, what happens if that happens? Because it's so easy for us to get right back on track to that cycle that says, well, we this behavior happened, and because I did that, now I need to compensate. I need to make up for those calories. I need to make up for whatever behavior it was, holiday weekend, whatever it might be. And it's just so easy for us to get back on that cycle versus having a compassionate approach, talking it out and understanding that perhaps what led us here could have, and this is something that's so common that I see as a dietitian, is just the overall underfueling during the week. It's that cycle that really fuels the eventual quote unquote overdoing it, or feeling like there's it doesn't even have to be quote unquote overdoing it. And I put that in quotes specifically because we can't define what that really means. Overdoing it for one person so often is actually just meeting their needs, but they're not realizing it because their baseline nutrient intake is too low. So this is the most common thing that I see among dancers, is that them feeling like they're overdoing it is actually them meeting their needs. So often I like to actually refer to this as, and then of course I don't want to discredit how they're feeling in that moment. So it's not necessarily about feeling like you overdid it, but rather that you feel like you felt out of control around those certain foods. And as we know, most dancers like to feel that instance of being in control. So when there's any degree of feeling out of control around food, that's when the imbalance occurs, right? That's when we start to, those emotions and those feelings can now be brought on. So how can we take a more empathetic and compassionate approach in order to, of course, intervene upon that?
So true. Sorry, I keep muting myself, by the way. There's someone mowing their lawn outside of my window. Of course, always when I try to film, they're mowing their lawn, which I'm like, good for you, beautifying my street, but maybe later. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think this is a great segue to start talking about the pressures that dancers face. And I would personally be very curious to talk about how dancers can overcome peer pressure of what they see their friends being praised for, or their friends maybe propagating these ideas of like, I skipped lunch, I'm not eating a snack, or I'm gluten-free, which is fine to a certain degree. Yeah, I mean, I'm not out here giving diet advice. Sorry, I'm just gonna. These are my personal opinions.
Like it's fine if you have a diagnosed celiac. Celiac diagnosis. But yeah, your question is great, because this happens with most of the dancers I work with in regard to what they're seeing their friends do, and not just what their friends are doing, but what they're hearing about with professional dancers.
Yes, and teachers too, giving diet advice in class.
And also, and we could 100%, and we could even go as far as to say in the non-dance world, actually, there was this article, I'm not going to give specifics because it's an extremely triggering article. It was brought to my attention from another client of mine, a dancer. It was an article in a really big magazine. I'm talking, I want to say, maybe it was like Architectural Digest. It wasn't like I don't think that was the magazine. I'm forgetting the exact name, but I don't even want to give details about it, but it was of that level. And there was an interview with a very up their name in the celebrity world about what I eat in a day. And
yikes. Yeah, those Harper's Bazaar videos are kind of whack sometimes on
maybe
YouTube.
It was them. It might have even been them, but the person that they were interviewing wasn't like a celebrity. It was a very up there designer. And the whole what I eat in a day was, it was like, oh my God, like this person literally, the behaviors that they were partaking in were eating disorder like behaviors. And to have this in the media, to have anybody be reading this in a magazine of that level, it's so easy to get hung up, to take this for face value and to say, can't be that bad. It's being published in this article, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing, of course, happens in our dance studios. If you now have a dance teacher, and I'm not throwing shade to dance teachers. There are so many dance teachers that reach out to me that are doing such an incredible job of promoting healthy habits in their studio. But of course, we have, I would say, helpful and unhelpful in every field, in
Yeah.
every line of work, even in the nutrition world. When they start talking about behaviors around food, what dancers quote unquote should and shouldn't be doing, and of course they don't have the training in food and nutrition, then we see major issues, because you have these young dancers who are impressionable, who are saying, wow, if my teacher is doing this, she's had this professional career, she's done this, she does this, she seems to have energy by the time she teaches me, it must work. So the first things first, I can't discredit that dancers are going to not see these behaviors, right? That's the first thing. We can't live in a bubble. We have to come to terms with the fact that there are going to be friends, parents, teachers, whoever it might be, that are going to partake in behaviors around food that are restrictive, whether it is a 12-day cleanse, whether it is just what seems like a harmless diet. One in particular comes to mind. I'm going to say it. I don't think it's triggering for me to say it, but like Noom, as an example, Noom.
Yeah.
It's like a kind of the Weight Watchers of our generation type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really sells itself as being this like harmless, even though it's full-blown eating disorder like behaviors.
Yikes.
Regardless, that's going to be out there. That's why the first step is education around the facts being, and this is to segue into your question, what do I tell these dancers? What do we work on? We need to start educating ourselves about the facts. What does restrictive eating do to us? Now, I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but when we talk about these lifestyles and these behaviors and how they're sold and marketed to us as being what works or what doesn't work, so far what that is talking about is in the realm of weight loss. First, dancers need to realize that their priority is most often performance. So this is where immediately we have to separate dancers out, right? Because our goals are they should be performance related. Now, that might not be the goal for every dancer listening to your channel. And if it's not, then I encourage that they reach out to a dietitian like myself so that their goals can be better aligned to support them and to support what they're looking for in their dance training. Performance, what we need to start to realize the facts is that when we are approaching our performance nutrition from a restrictive framework, we're immediately causing psychological and biological consequences that are going to only derail from our overall performance. So then I get the dancers that are like, no, I see her perform. She's a principal of XYZ and I see what she eats. Okay, but let's talk about the future. Let's talk about her risk of injury. We don't know what's happening behind closed doors, number one. A dancer can be partaking in restrictive eating behaviors around other people, and then perhaps overdoing, I shouldn't say overdoing it, but perhaps compensating for those restrictive behaviors behind closed doors. That's the first thing. We can't assess their relationship with food just by what you see them doing in the studio. The second thing is, we know the facts, the evidence that if we are approaching food with a restrictive approach, we're going to increase our risk to injury. Bone-related injuries, stress fractures are, of course, very common. We could see depletion in bone mass with as little as 3 months of a restriction. That's pretty quick. That's a quick turnover. Wow. But there's also the other types of modalities that can cause injury, like lack of concentration. Within a week of restricting your food intake, you're going to start to feel the effects of difficulty concentrating, obsessive thoughts about food and nutrition. This is so often what I post about because it's the things that we don't often think about when it comes to just not eating enough on a day in, day out basis. So I really, to answer your question, what I encourage dancers do is to look at the evidence, look at the facts, or obviously I don't expect them to look at the evidence, but work with a dietitian who can help teach you the evidence of what restrictive dieting does to performance, how it does increase injury risk in regards to bone health, in regards to your overall performance and training abilities or capabilities. So that would be the first, in my opinion, what really hits home for a lot of dancers, because they like the black and white knowledge.
They love it. Love it.
yeah, they like the straight up facts.
Yeah.
And this is great because we have straight up facts. We know that bone density is depleted over time when the body doesn't have enough calories to function. It's not only about calcium and D, it's also about calories. We know that bone health also declines when a body doesn't have enough fat on it, when there's not enough body fat on it. We also know that hormonal imbalances ensue around our appetite when we're partaking in restrictive behaviors.
Yeah.
When we are not eating enough fat throughout our day, guess what? We're going to feel hungry throughout our day. That is a hormonal response. Leptin, our response to our body's leptin, it decreases. The production of leptin decreases. This is our feel full hormone. We also know that when we don't eat enough carbohydrates, hormones are released that are going to induce cravings for carbohydrates because it's what your body wants. It's a survival mechanism. So there's so many things that happen because of restrictive dieting that we very much know there are concrete consequences that we can't hide from that often hit home with the dancers. So it's like, yes, you are seeing those behaviors, and I'm not going to deny that there will be dancers out there who are being praised for behaviors, being praised for how their body looks, but let's look at the long-term consequences of what's happening there.
That's so important. Yeah, you're so right. Like the mythology in our culture really can't stand up to facts when you actually look at them and give them the time of day. And that has been something that's been sobering in my own journey. I've been open about this on my channel. I've spoken a few years ago about when my body started to change because I decided to step away from the professional realm. I talked about how emotional that was, but then also how there were just some certain things I knew about the price I'm no longer willing to pay to look a certain way. For what? And when you do start to think more long term and acknowledge that, there isn't just one rainbow, ideal, perfect solution where you can have it all. Like you can have a lot and have a great life as a dancer, fueling yourself properly. And I think you and I both agree that we're not trying to say you can eat anything you want and go to any ballet school and just don't care what people think and people are going to treat you great. No, there will be some schools that I think you and I would both advise that dancers stay away from. There will be some school company situations that you may have to consider walking away from for your own health. There will be situations where dancers, like you said, are praised for their own unhealthy behaviors. And there will be a consequence to any action. Consequence not necessarily meaning a negative thing. It could be a great benefit that you reap for yourself. But with each choice you make, there's also that opportunity cost of, sure, you can restrict and get a little praise from a teacher now, but what price will you pay later? That's a great question to consider. And we're not trying to be killjoys here. I think there is such an opportunity for flourishing that you'll only know if you really try to give yourself a chance of eating with freedom, having a healthy mindset around food, giving your body what it needs. Like you'll really only know experientially how great that is when you do give it a try. And yeah, there might be adjustments that you need to make in the setting that you're in or with your own decision for what you're going to be willing to tolerate, whether it's that friction amongst you and your teachers. For example, like I was in a university program, and so this is a theoretical situation. It wasn't literal, but I think the price I might have had to pay if there was an issue with the way that I looked and I was in the first year of my degree program. I had decided that I wanted to finish the course with this university. I didn't want to transfer. And so if I had faced a situation, which sadly I know some dancers do, where it was being imposed upon me, you need to look a different way, we'll take parts away from you, whatever. I would have had to count the cost for myself of my decision to stay, but then also remain in my own healthy relationship with my body and food. Sure, there would be a price to pay for that, but there would also be a price to pay if I said, okay, sure, I'll do whatever you want. I'll be whatever you want. That's fine. So there might be a consequence either way, but making aligned decisions for yourself of what's the long-term vision that you want? What's the kind of freedom and relationship you do want to have with food? How do you want to honor yourself in that way, in your own body, your own instrument? Those are also very worthy questions to give weight to.
Yeah, one word that I always throw out there, which sums it all up in my opinion, is sustainability. You know,
Mhm.
we want to, I'll never forget my own experience. I literally can picture where I was in the dance studio. This is when I knew I needed a change. I remember looking in the mirror. I wasn't like looking at my body or anything. I speak about this a lot on my blog. I have a lot of body aligned privileges in the world at large and in regards to the dance world. I
Mhm.
didn't experience the same level of systemic shaming and oppression
Yeah.
that a lot of other dancers who experience, and I definitely acknowledge that. I remember looking in the mirror and being like, wow, I can't keep up with these behaviors. I was obsessed with trying to eat healthy, and I
Mhm.
was planning what I was eating every single day, from how to get the most nutrients to how to get in the healthiest meal. And it didn't allow room for error, for eating out, for having these fun experiences. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I cannot keep on doing this. How the
Mhm.
hell? I was a sophomore at the time. I was like, how the hell am I going to do this for another 2.5 years? I'm like, and
Ah,
then literally, I don't remember if it was that week or that day, but that's when I threw in an application and transferred.
yeah.
But I
Wow.
eventually got into the school that I wanted to transfer to.
Yeah.
But yes, that's essentially when I transferred, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm taking myself out. I was luckily I was able to see a lot of perspective in
Mhm.
regards to, like, I knew that I, even though I had this all or nothing mindset around dance, around food, I didn't have this all or nothing mindset around dance, because I was like, oh no, I don't need to study this. I'll I'll transfer schools, I'll study something else, and I can still dance. Like, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had that. You know what I mean? Where I wasn't being compelled to, like, stay in an environment that obviously wasn't supportive for me, and
Mhm.
whether it was the school's fault, my fault, whatever. It just, I was lucky enough to see the perspective that I was able to change environments. I
Yes.
also feel privileged in that sense. I was in New York, and New York has so many different environments and opportunities for dance and for nutrition. So I had a lot, of course, at my fingertips. I realized that not all dancers have all of that, have all of those resources and different opportunities.
Mhm.
But it was good for me to take myself out of the dance
Yeah.
world for the time being, in order to just regain that love and that passion that had so quickly diminished for me.
Mm. Yeah. I'm sure, and I
And
hope. Oh, go ahead.
and I was going to say, just to kind of make it full circle, it came down to sustainability.
Yeah.
I saw that the behaviors that I was partaking in, I would not be able to keep up with them for another 2 years. Like that, it just sounded exhausting to
Yeah.
me. I literally just remember saying to myself, like, I cannot keep doing this. Something's got to change.
Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful note to end on. And I think that the insight I would like to draw out from what you just said is a belief I have, which actually brings me a lot of comfort in life and then also around my own body. And it's interesting. I started this conversation from my end talking about the mathematical mindset. And in a way that can actually be helpful, I think, when we see
Sure.
our bodies and also our minds and our emotional being, when we see those as bank accounts in a way. And sure, there is some flexibility and we can grow, we can adapt, we can adapt to have new capacities as humans. But overall, I'm sure you've said this or heard it quite a bit of, eventually, if what you're doing isn't sustainable, your body will let you know. It will guide you back. But I don't see that bank account analogy as, you could keep making withdrawals and eventually you'll go bankrupt and then something will have to happen to kind of get back on course. I actually don't see that as such a negative thing. I see it as a thing that actually brings me a lot of comfort, that it's not just up to my own mind to figure out what I need to do and how it needs to work and blah, blah, blah. I think our bodies will lovingly guide us back to a place of wholeness if we do listen to them. And our
Yeah.
minds and our emotional beings also, I feel, do that. And so if we are really um, going into unhealthy mental patterns of adopting a habit of intense self criticism in order to motivate yourself through fear and the mindset of scarcity in order to work hard enough, in order to be good enough. I see that mindset a lot. Eventually, that will run you dry. But I don't see that as such a bad thing. I see it as great feedback that our own bodies give us to guide us back to where we need to be. And eventually, like you and I were both talking before we started recording, eventually you and I have made our way back to the stage. We made our way back to a loving and wholesome relationship with dance and with our bodies. And it comes with time. Maybe you won't have the perfect situation right away when you decide to start adopting healthier habits or mindsets. But with time, I do believe everyone can kind of get back to their own version of that place if you are committed to the value of sustainability. So that's the encouragement and kind of sum up I want to encourage dancers with. Any closing thoughts of your own?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more in regards to our bodies are insanely smart. And if we not just learn how to listen to, if we learn how to listen to it, then it's going to communicate what it needs. We see this directly with sleep. We see this with food in regard to those cravings, in regard to the psychological end of restrictive eating habits. Humans are curious beings. We're always going to want to, we're going to want what we think we can't essentially have. So if we're telling ourselves that we can't have something, we're going to drive the desire for that. And it's super important. Similar to what you're saying, is that's not such a bad thing in regards to I'm not saying restrictive eating is not a good thing, but what I'm saying is if we flip the perspective and we realize that our bodies are doing us a service by having cravings, right? Cravings are not a bad thing, is what I'm trying to say. So many dancers fear or are wondering, like, why do I have a sweet tooth? Dancers shouldn't have a sweet tooth, or why do I crave these foods? And it's like, that's not a bad thing. That's your body working. That's your body literally saying that it hasn't had enough of this, it needs more. So essentially I think that's what you're trying to say as well. I also see this with, just left my mind actually. Oh my gosh. The analogy literally just came in and it left.
It'll come back. I always plant the seed. I say it's in there and it comes.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yes. Yeah. But just the overall fact that I see this with hunger cues.
It's back.
A lot of dancers will, their hunger cues will naturally diminish from restrictive eating. And then when they start to reintroduce foods, and we of course do this together within a supportive environment, they start to get very nervous about this idea of having hunger cues and having them throughout the day, multiple times a day, because essentially we need multiple meals and snacks throughout the day. And what I say is, hunger cues are an incredible thing. It literally is evidence that your body is working, your metabolism is burning, it's doing what it needs to do. And that's why you're feeling this way. So instead of being upset by it, instead of being scared by it, look at this as your body doing an incredible thing. It's telling you that it needs nourishment right now. It needs food.
Yeah, such a good point. Well, Rachel, it's been so good to talk to you. And I know I learned from this conversation. I hope others have learned and felt encouraged as well. So I'd love to hear, where can dancers find you, work with you, hear more of your wisdom.
Yes, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure chatting with you as well. The first place I always point dancers to is just my free resource site. It's very straightforward, dancenutrition.com. And this is where I'll post a weekly article. I've got a YouTube channel as well that we can link to, and free course, free downloads, a lot of free content to help dancers with the starting process of healing their relationship with food, and also learning how to eat in a way that fuels their performance.
Awesome.
So check out dancenutrition.com. For dancers who definitely want to take it a step up, level up what they're learning about nutrition, this is where I would say check out some of my online courses, paid online courses, or even the Healthy Dancer Elite program. This is a 8-week program where I work with dancers one-on-one. Of course, there are extensions to this program and follow-ups. I'll work with dancers for 6 months, even up to a year. And then last, I have a couple group programs throughout the year. Today actually kicks off my summer intensive. So pretty much every May, for anyone listening to this, and it's in the future, every May I open registration for the Healthy Dancer Summer Intensive, which is a group program. Kristen, I'd actually love to have you there in the future, perhaps teaching a masterclass or a workshop.
I'd love that.
Yes. And we've got over 20 workshops, master classes, all centered around injury prevention and injury recovery for dancers.
Awesome.
It's virtual and it really can align with any dancer's schedule in regard to their other summer intensives. And then I have the winter intensive. This is shorter, it's only 4 weeks, and it's a little bit more lax, I should say. And that happens around Nutcracker season, so in December.
That's
so
great.
everything can be checked out. I've got 2 websites, as I mentioned, dancenutrition.com and then pointenutrition.com. Talks a little bit more about my services and how you can work with me as a dietitian.
Yes. Oh, that's so awesome. I hope many dancers will reach out, and you're on Instagram as well. I'll link all your stuff below so you're easy to find. Well, thank you, Rachel. This has been so good.
Yes, Kristen, such a pleasure connecting, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks everyone for watching.